I don't know if that one's muted or not.
Yeah. So just make sure whoever sits there, they unmute. Yeah.
Probably not gonna matter. All right, we are rolling.
I'm not gonna worry about the charging for that one.
That's fine.
That'll be fine.
Yeah.
So,
I'll be around. I'll kind of be eyeballing the meeting a little bit, make sure everything looks okay.
so there's 10 people watching online. Is that the participants then?
No, that's
That's all of us.
yeah, so it's you five, and Will's on, Debbie, Kevin.
Hey, Ryan.
One over there for people that are.
Free evening from now on, everybody.
What's that? Or you can sit next to Doug if you
You
want.
have, well, I can make it work. Mine just seems to be sucking battery right now.
Oh, here, I'll get you something.
No, that's
You
fine.
can move it. You can
I think my cord's pretty long enough.
Yeah, we'll start.
I got it.
Mark that one first.
So.
I don't know if that means, that sounds. You guys didn't show me, all right.
And then, right now, it's muted.
Okay.
But obviously, and if there's long periods of time when you're not gonna talk it, just so we minimize
Okay. Okay. It's just not showing that I have any power. Sorry, I was a little late. We'll call the meeting to order. We'll call the meeting to order and take roll call. And if you notice I'm sweating, that's because I was working on my defensive stance, so I apologize. Thank you.
Slade,
Yes.
Corey,
Yes.
Cody,
Yep.
Mark,
Yes.
Kyle.
Yep. All right. Then we have a motion to approve the agenda, but I think there's a few changes.
So basically the only real change I have is we have some representatives from Freeman Academy here, which kind of told them we just bumped them right away after we approved the agenda because they got some other meetings to get to tonight. And then, other than a couple of things in my report, and Doug got a hold of me a couple of weeks ago and said that he had some things he wanted to present or address with the board. So he was thrown on there, but he definitely gave adequate notice on that end. So that's what we have for tonight there.
Okay.
So everything's in front of you on there, I guess I should say, would be the easiest thing.
Then do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Cody,
Second.
second by Corey. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Conflict of interest disclosures,
None that
None,
have been
okay.
presented to me.
and then public input, but I think we're gonna hold off for just a second, Doug. And then, we've got to approve the agendas for the meeting of December 10th, 2020, the special meeting on the 10th, the regular meeting on December 16th, 2020, the minutes of the special board meeting on January 4th, 2021. So do I have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. And then the minutes of Corn Belt Cooperative Board of Directors meeting on December 15th, the financial reports and the claims for January. Does anybody have any questions on anything? No. Do we have a motion to approve that stuff? Motion by Corey, second by Mark. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, then I think we're gonna skip to Nathan. Floor is yours.
That should be ready to roll over there.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening. I also would like to acknowledge that Jared Preheim, one of the other school board members at Freeman Academy, is also here. And I will take a lot of your time. I'm just here that we're all aware that there's been several conversations about consolidation and co-ops with different schools in the area. And our intent from Freeman Academy is that we would like to be active participants in any co-op discussions that would take place. It's been a few years since we've had some of those conversations between Freeman Academy and Freeman Public. And we figure if they're happening again, we would definitely like to be part of it. Even to the point where Freeman Academy board members would be willing to meet with representatives from the Freeman Public Board to gauge interest and find out what next steps would be. And that is my only prepared statement. It's short and sweet. I didn't know if there would be other questions or comments that any of you have.
I don't have any questions.
Do you want to elaborate any, that's nice and short and sweet, but like, are you talking sports, one sport, other possible looking at other options, or what are you?
Our board has had some, again, we haven't had a lot of conversations, but there have been some preliminary discussions on that. And I think we would be open to any of that if it was just a single sport or if it's multiple sports. I think our long-term goal would be is to have for all sports between the two schools.
I know at our last meeting that we had here in the gymnasium, there was one person that brought up a comment about sharing teachers. And I think a person said that just hadn't worked in the past because I think the students kind of got shuttled back and forth. And someone I think made a comment afterwards a while about making like sharing of teachers. That was one person saying that. Is that something that is on the table too, or not really? Or
That would not be an area that we have really discussed at this point, but just gauging from some of the other pretty minor comments from other board members, I don't think we would be in any way opposed to having some of those conversations. There have been some of those relationships in the past between the two schools at different times. I mean, you could go way back 40 years and it was different than it was a few years later than that. I wouldn't say that those conversations would be deal breakers for us.
Like I said, I think I had talked to you, Nathan, and I think I'm not speaking for the board, but I don't think we're quite at a point where we even really know what we're doing yet. So, but it is nice to know that you're interested in doing that. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I understand that as well. And for us, we haven't been actively involved in conversations with anybody else either at this point. But we are small enough, and we realize that if things change, we want to be part of those conversations. And we've had a very good relationship with Marion as far as co-ops go. There is really no issues, but we're both pretty small schools. And the point of co-oping is to work with the longevity of your program. And we understand that. And so that's why we want to be part of conversations if Freeman is open to having them at some point.
Good. Anybody?
I don't think any of us are opposed to having a conversation. Whether that conversation is fruitful or not, remains to be seen, but it's never a bad idea to talk it out. So I think going forward, we could probably work something like that into it.
Anybody else got any questions?
What I'll say is, and you and I, Kyle and I had a conversation a little bit earlier today about some of the stuff, even just in regards to what the other items on the agenda are. I think it's important for people to understand that we're not making any long-term decisions tonight. Essentially, what we had talked about was trying to keep things as simple as possible tonight, as far as, you know, are we interested in trying to find out more information about this topic or this topic? You know, we are or we aren't, and that will kind of guide what we decide to do moving forward. So, you know, we don't want to put the board in a situation where they're obligated to do anything based on the decisions they make tonight or anything like that. But like Kyle said, it's good for us to know that you're interested in having those conversations once we kind of self-evaluate and figure out, you know, what we're thinking about moving forward.
I appreciate that.
Good way to look at it, because to do it well, it takes time, and we understand that, and we would not want to rush into anything, because that's not good for either party.
All right. If you don't have anything else, thanks, Nathan.
Yeah. Thank you again. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Do you want to just circle back and just go to Doug then right away? That's fine?
I think so.
Okay. It's yours, Doug.
I'll try to keep this brief. I don't know if I can be as short as Nathan. First, I just want to say thanks for hearing me out. I want to preface what I'm about to say. It might sound vague, and that's intentional. I've read and reviewed the information from the State Department of Education and the district's information on complaint policies, conduct at school board meetings. So this may be vague, but this is a concern I've had for quite some time. With the talks of consolidation, I wanted to bring it before the board now too. I know other people in the community have talked to me about it. I had some dialogue with Kevin, and he's provided me with some real good information. And thanks, Kevin. I appreciate that. That'll definitely keep this shorter than it would have been. So I wanted to talk tonight about staff evaluation, about timing. It is my opinion, I should say, that there's some really great people in the school district here, great teachers, great administrators, great staff. The frustration I have is I believe sometimes habitually underperforming staff administration is allowed to stay on board and has contract renewed, and it doesn't seem like anything happens for a number of years. With consolidation coming, I think that maybe it's a time to just take a step back, look at what processes are in place, how they may be improved. As Kevin told me, you know, the teaching staff evaluations happen throughout the year. There's nothing formal and scheduled unless it needs to be. I don't disagree with that. I think that in my mind, it might be prudent to have a kind of a blanket evaluation of teaching staff halfway through the school year. You know, it's always easier to bring up things that need to be addressed shortly after they happen, rather than waiting for months at a time, or addressing them maybe at the beginning of the school year where there's no real information to go off of. I know the administrative reviews happen sometime in the spring. I guess that's the main thing I wanted to speak to tonight. As I understand it from Kevin, obviously the board does his review, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, that Kevin does the evaluations for the rest of the administrative staff by himself. I reached out to 6 other districts, and we're the only one currently doing that. Every other district has either the entire board or certain members of the board sit in on those evaluations. I don't think it's fair or right to task Kevin with that and to not have another set of eyes in the room. I think it's, you know, a group approach is best for everything. You get different perspectives. You know, everybody has a different opinion of performance, how things go, maybe different input on how performance could be improved. Or maybe, you know, it's always nice to hear that you're doing a great job if it comes from more than one person. So I'd like the board to consider maybe examining that policy and looking into it and seeing if that becomes a superintendent plus board function. The other thing I wanted to mention is in years past, I don't know if it's available now, there were grants available to school districts from the government to allow outside evaluation. Most of those ran on a 3-year period where an outside consultant would come in, review the staff, report back, be part of the evaluations for that calendar year. A little bit of it was a bargaining chip with some consulting firms because they had hoped to be retained beyond that 3-year period, but those may be options or things that the board could look into. I think that, there'll obviously be more conversation tonight about consolidation, but that might be one of those things that, the reality is if a full consolidation happened, like Tom Oster mentioned, the contracts become void and everybody has to be issued a new contract. So I think maybe an outside set of eyes, if it came to that, would be a good measuring stick for where we're at as a school. And the same thing with Marion, where they're at, where their staff is and what their capabilities or shortcomings might be. So I thank you and ask you to take that under consideration.
Thank you, Doug. Just a quick question, and maybe Kevin or Deb, do you know where those grants are located? If that's something we're able to look up, if that's something we choose to look into?
I would have to do some,
They mentioned it was really helpful tools for their districts, so I don't know.
I'll maybe give you a call.
sure, and I would have to do some asking around because I'm not familiar with, I guess, the superintendents in the schools that I deal with most frequently of them doing that, but
Okay.
I guess I've never specifically asked either, so.
Well, something we can look into anyway. There is no other public input then, I don't think, right? So then administrative reports. Shane's not here?
I'm here.
Oh, he popped on the screen. Hi, Shane.
Hey, how are you? Kyle, I don't have much. We haven't been in school much.
Hold on.
Shane, can you hear me?
Heard him talking over here.
Shane, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. You got anything that you need to share?
Not really. We haven't really been in school. I've got some kids in quarantine, staff member in quarantine, but everything's outside of the school building. Most of them will get tested this week to get back into school on that 7-day policy. That's about it.
Questions for Shane? Thanks, Shane. So, thanks, Shane. Will.
I'm unmuted here. Okay. Just a couple things. Like Shane said, we've only been in school a few days, so there's not a whole lot, but it's been nice. There's been little to no online learning taking place kind of on both ends of the building. So that's kind of been nice to see. Most of the kids are here, walk around the halls. And I mean, it's nice to have all the kids back in. You talk to some of the teachers and it's nice to teach the kids in the classroom and not have to so much worry about the online stuff. So that's been a good kind of breath of fresh air to start the new year. Right. As we get into the second semester here, we kind of start thinking about testing, and I realize that's kind of down the road, but Smarter Balance and ACT stuff, as far as the high school side, is, at least in my math classroom, kind of on the mind of getting ready for some of those things. And I know elementary, I think it starts probably around March time, but those things are coming. And then kind of to go off of, as Doug brought up before, one of the things that Mr. Faulkner and I are looking at the schedule for next year and just trying to find ways to maybe improve it or tweak it, things that didn't work this year, or maybe areas of concern, and trying to find ways to make it be better for next year. So kind of looking ahead already into next year. So that's all I had. Not a whole lot this first couple weeks here.
Any questions for Will? Thanks, Will. Kevin?
So you can see I got about 5 things listed on the agenda. The first is when they passed the recent federal package for some more COVID aid, stimulus money, so on and so forth. We were kind of speculating as to what that was actually going to mean for us. We've had a couple different rounds of federal money that have come our way since March. Sounds like we are anticipating probably anywhere in that $300,000 to $320,000 range as far as what we're going to get out of that. It's a similar setup to what we had in March, where they're going to base it on title allocations and different things of that nature. So I think they say that there's a relatively broad number of uses for that money, but it's not going to be as simple as some of the money that the state gave us during the summer. I mean, usually with that federal stuff, there's a lot of loopholes and hoops we have to jump through to justify why we're using it for this, so on and so forth. But for the most part, I don't think that's going to be too terrible. The governor, in her address, it's probably about a month ago now, said that there's an additional $11 million that's going to be set aside in the state budget for next year. And that's essentially, the plan is to use that for schools that kind of had fluctuations in enrollment this fall, one way or the other. So you kind of have, on one hand, the schools that ended up, for some reason or another, losing kids that would be counted towards their fall enrollment because of maybe just opting to homeschool or moving out and going somewhere else. And then the other side of that would be schools that kind of fall into our situation, where when we made the count back in September, we were at about 337 kids. And if you counted our enrollment right now, we're up over 350. So essentially there's about 12 to 15 kids in there that we have for the majority of the year that we don't actually receive any state funding for. So they're trying to find a way to kind of, balance that a little bit for schools that lost, or maybe schools that actually benefited but didn't actually see any money from that. So I think they're probably going to do that on a per student allocation, but we're hopefully going to get more information on that as we get closer to the end of the school year here. The legislative session starts tomorrow. I don't have a whole lot on the radar right now as far as anything specific that is floating around out there that might really impact us one way or the other, but it's still pretty early on with that stuff. The one thing just to keep in mind, and I brought up a couple times at a few different meetings, is the governor proposed a 2.4% increase for education funding. So if that holds true, that would be the biggest increase we've gotten since before the 16-17 school year. So good news on that end. Actually, in some of the conversations that I've had with Doug and some of the correspondence that we have sent back and forth to each other, it kind of got me thinking about a couple different things here. And actually, as we kind of got into some of this federal money stuff, it kind of prompted some different, ideas, so to speak. One thing is we did some different things with math this year. We started trying to split kids sooner on. And ultimately, the idea there was to try to accelerate as many kids as possible and get kids, at the appropriate level so we can provide them with the instruction they need based on where they are. Some of that comes from the fact that we assumed last spring when we had to finish the school year online that there was probably going to be some additional gaps created in learning for some kids just because of the discrepancy between instruction in the building versus instruction out of the building. So, one of the things that we are going to need for next year is we're going to need to increase our FTE for our math at the 6 through 12 side of the building. So the way our current administrative structure or teaching structure is set up is we have that half math, half administrative position. So I guess what I'm going to propose, and I'll try to give you some rationale for that, is the math thing has to increase one way or the other if we want to stick on that path that we're on. What I would really like to see happen is, if we're going to do that, to take the other half that's administrative and turn that back into a full-time principal position. Now, I know when we got rid of that to begin with, it was a matter of money. And a couple of years ago, when we tried to bring back some additional help, that was kind of a sore subject with some people throughout the community. But what I have been able to figure out here is we can use the COVID situation as an opportunity to fund both of those things moving forward for at least the next 2 years, using some of that federal money that we'd be getting. So obviously, the way that stuff kind of works is you're trying to supplement what you're currently doing as opposed to supplanting expenses that you already have. So the expenses that were already associated with those positions, which we already been paying for the last 2 years, that would stay. But the additions, as far as making both positions full-time, would actually not have to come out of taxpayer money, at least for the next 2 years. We'd be able to use that federal money for it. So obviously the math side of things, I think everybody can kind of understand. The principal side of things, kind of like I had mentioned, that Doug, with what Doug had said, when I started here 5 years ago now, and was just the principal of the middle school and the high school, or the junior high and high school at the time, I feel like the teachers were set up to have a lot more support, because you had one person that could just focus on being in the classroom consistently on a daily basis and not having to really struggle to find gaps in a schedule to be able to get in there at least a couple times a week. And I think, to speak to what Doug was saying, if we had somebody there that could completely dedicate themselves to the kids and the staff on this side of the building during the actual school day, I think you'd see a lot less issues when it comes to the perception with some of the evaluation things and different things of that nature, because you'd actually have somebody in there to be able to provide that support and consistency all the time. I did send out a short survey to the staff, just tell them that we were kind of exploring that particular idea. Off the top of my head here, I'd have to look as far as what I got back for responses, because it's kind of shifted throughout the day here. But basically, of the 18 people that I've had respond to that, the majority of them believe that when we had to go from 2 to 3, and even when we tried to bring back a half a couple years ago, that we've lost, that instructional leadership aspect of things. And of the 18, 15 of the 18 feel that, adding back that full-time position would be very beneficial, not only to staff and to students. So it's not something that we have to decide on tonight one way or the other, but it is something that I would like you to consider a little bit moving forward, is that with the number of kids we've gained in the last 5 years, which is upwards of 50 right now, we're really kind of starting to miss out on that particular position on this side of the building. So I just think, if, obviously based on the public meeting the other night, we can see that we're trending in the right direction as far as enrollment and some different things. And we're hopefully going to be able to get taxpayers and some other people out from underneath some of the money that they kind of helped us out with a few years ago. I think the fact that we can use some of this federal money for 2 years to make this happen until we get to a position where, we shouldn't, at that point still, if our enrollment trends continue, have to ask people for extra money to make that work. I think it'd be worthwhile. And I think the people in the building and the kids would appreciate it in the long run. I think it would do a lot for us on a lot of different levels. So I don't know if anybody has any comments they want to make on that, but one way or the other, yes or no, whether we want to do it or not, I think the sooner we would decide that, particularly if we decide that it's something that we're okay with moving forward on, the better possibility that we're going to find, quality candidates to fill those particular positions. One thing to point out that might be of note, if we would decide to take the current position and expand to 2, we would have to RIF or eliminate the current position, and then we would advertise for 2 separate positions. So the person that's currently filling that position would have to reapply for whichever one of those positions that we want to, they would want to go ahead and take on, if that's the case. So I just figured I'd kind of give you some background on process there. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. If not, I'll move on to the.
So that COVID-19 aid, you were saying we could use that to fill in a teaching gap as well. The last regular meeting, we had questions on computer classes. We just don't have the staff to offer those kind of classes. Is that something that we could use to fill in the gaps that we're having right now?
So the important thing to remember off the bat is it's not whatever we would use it for, it's not a forever fix. So the money has to be allocated by September of 2023. So essentially you would get about 2 years out of it, where you have to spend it within that 2-year time frame. Now they give you some stipulations as far as what you can use it for. what we'd be looking for in these two situations is, well, I already kind of talked about the gaps that were created in the math program and what we've tried to do to remedy those. Because we'd be adding something to try to make up for that gap, that's how this money would be available to us to use. Same thing with the administrative side of things. Teachers needing more support because of the different things we're asking them to do. Boom, it falls into that category. You can make it work. I think you could make a similar argument for several other areas. Special education, title, different things like that. ELL. I mean, just some different areas there where if you have groups of kids where you feel that those learning gaps were made even bigger by COVID, you can make the argument that, yeah, we need to use this money to try to tighten up some of those things. So, we might have to look at it for a little bit and figure out, okay, was it because of COVID that we weren't able to offer some of these things, which I suppose you could make the argument that would be the case. But I think, at least temporarily, you'd be able to find something to fill some gaps, at least short term. And I think what that would allow you to do, one way or the other, whatever you use it for, is, like I said, you're not asking tax. So, and then like I said, the way things are trending in 2.5 years, I'm anticipating that we're going to be even better financially because of the enrollment trend that we have going on right now. So I think it's conceivable to think that even after that 2-year period, you're going to be able to pick up the slack without having to ask people for more money. So, correct. So long answer to your question. Yes, I think we could probably use it for that. Other questions on that right now? Comments? Anything? All right. The other thing, Kyle contacted me today. I know we've had a number of meetings, or we've talked about gym access and some different things. I know at one point last year when we made some improvements to that building, we talked about the potential for allowing kids, under 18 to be in the gym, unsupervised. I had kind of forgot about it until Kyle had called me today, because we had some time over the summer where we weren't really letting anybody in. And then as we got into the fall, I kind of forgot about it and nobody really said anything. But we are set up to the point in there where we could do that now. I guess the main thing I would need to know at this point is we'd have to do something kind of in the interim as far as some type of waiver, if you're going to allow people under 18 to do it. And then ultimately we'd have to probably make some type of policy change. But I think there's kind of a stopgap in between where you could make it work until we work out all the details on that. My question for you would be, what age groups are you okay with being allowed to go in there without the parental supervision? And I don't remember what we had talked. I mean, we're talking like almost a year ago, the last time we talked about this. So I
thought we were 8th grade to seniors is kind of where we had fallen, but it might have been freshman.
I don't remember either.
I don't remember. I don't.
It doesn't matter to me. The only thing we just need to know is obviously like I told you, those ID badge things that we have for kids to use lunch and all that stuff. I can have Seth program those to work to get into that particular area, so you don't have to worry about parents and their phones and different things like that. It's just a matter of knowing whose we have to program, and then, like I said, getting something set up that kind of covers us in terms of what the rules are and different things there. So whatever you guys want to do as far as the age groups there, I mean, it doesn't matter, but.
Do we have any 7th graders on any JV teams? Or is it all 8th graders? On the boys? Okay. Yeah, I should have asked you.
I mean, I just talked about it over the weekend, whatever. Tammy had said she had to call Mr. Mask, and I said, well, I thought we had that in, and so that's why I called Kevin. So I was under these two already. And so, like I said, like Kevin said, we have it all set up, so I would be in favor of doing it. And I don't care. I mean, if everybody's comfortable with freshmen, I'm fine with that. Or if you want to do 8th graders, I don't care. But they're all in town, so I don't have a fear that they're going to have issues. And if they do, they can block individual kids, right?
We can. Some of that's a matter of tracking more so than, you know, the ability to block. I mean, you know, even with the surveillance and stuff, and we talked about this before, usually you don't know till after the fact, you know, if something did or didn't happen. I think 9 through 12 would be a good place to start. You kind of have to balance the whole response. I mean, it's more of a responsibility thing than anything, you know, as far as, do you think a kid that's a freshman in high school is responsible enough to be able to do that, you know, so on and so forth. Below that, you know, I don't know how you make a clear cut black and white decision on that one way or the other. I mean, you can make an argument probably for anybody. I mean, you could have people come in and say, well, my 5th grade kid's responsible enough to do that. So, like I said, I don't know. I don't know if we just start with 9 through 12 and see how it goes and then expand from there if we need to, or if we go lower than that. I was kind of, you know, the one thing I will say is I'm sure if you do this, people would appreciate it. But at the same time, you know, to this point in time, I was kind of surprised that parents have done a pretty good job of stepping up to bring their kids up here, because we really haven't heard anything in quite some time about, you know, any issues with that one way or the other. So like I said, it doesn't make any difference to me, but.
For me, I think there's a lot of 8th graders on these, you know, practice with varsity. It would make sense for me, but I could go along with anything.
The only reason I have years is because they're able to drive and probably can come without their parents. So like that is one group that is able to come without their parents. So they're still a parent, and so maybe that was why I picked that. Why I suggest 8th grade, but I don't care.
If you just want to do, you want to just do 8th grade and go from there?
You guys are comfortable with doing just middle school and high school? I mean, there's bad apples, you know, from 6th grade up through 12th grade. It doesn't really depend on the grades much in my mind as it does on the individual student. If that individual student's proven themselves that they're not trustworthy enough to go in the gym by themselves, we don't want that person in the gym by themselves. But 6 through 12, you know.
I know Vibrant Early, they do a thing that if you're caught doing something you shouldn't, you lose your gym privileges for the whole rest of the year. So if there's something with teeth like that, then that might be a possibility, but that's one idea. Once we start with 8th, and like I say, I could probably go all kinds of different directions on this one.
I'm comfortable going all the way down to 6th, but if you guys aren't, that's fine too.
How about we start with 8th for this year, and then we go, and then if that goes well, maybe we try 6th for next year, or for summer, or whatever. I mean, is that something we can with?
Or we could try 6th, and if that doesn't work out, we'll go to 8th. I can play that game too, Kyle.
Well, I just went in the middle
of 7th. Good.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't know. Well,
Meet me in the middle, 7th grade. No, all right.
I don't care.
Try it.
I don't care.
I think if you go 7th with them losing privileges for the rest of the year, I think I'd go with that.
I'm okay with putting teeth on it.
Okay. Fine by me.
Works for me.
So 7th, we're trying to come up with some sort of rules, and if this doesn't start for, I mean, we've gone, I mean, I think it's the whole battle season, but maybe we can come up with. Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Does that sound, Mr. Nancy?
All right. Last thing that I have, we kind of started trying to look at some capital projects and some different things for the summer, the upcoming summer. I got Randy Kerner is going to come on Wednesday. We're going to go through the parking lot and the bus lane and try to figure out a plan on that and the timeline on some of that stuff. You know, we had another bus go down the other day, and we're going to hold off on fixing that for now to see how things wrap up at the end of the year. But I think we're getting to the point now where we're probably gonna have to think about purchasing at least one bus and kind of start putting some of those others back into spare status. That'll be a little interesting because we might potentially be able to use some of that COVID money for that. I got to see how exactly that works. I know the last round, you were able to use it for that if you were, purchasing a bus because of new routes that you were adding or something like that. I'll have to see exactly how that falls into that. Obviously, each year we have some tech purchases. We might be able to squeeze some COVID money out of that too, as far as some of that stuff goes.
As far as the bus, are you thinking about getting like another big bus, or you think or you think about getting like smaller bus? Are they cheaper, more efficient, or like we don't fill a big bus like on our bus routes, or do a couple of them actually get pretty close to full? A couple of them do.
We tossed around the idea too of, because two of the buses that have gone down to this point have been bigger buses. Maybe we look at a bigger one, and then maybe you look at another smaller, 14 passenger one or 15, whatever they are, that somebody without a CDL can drive for,
So which one, can I ask which one's down, since we have the list sitting here in front of us?
7 plus 7. I think it's got over.
Not that miles matter a ton. Right. Not that miles matter a ton when it comes to some of those, but it's got it'll be a little bit of a mess there. So.
How was that little one working on? Is it something that's used a lot, or?
They use it a lot during football for sure. We haven't had this year, because of everything that's going on, we haven't had a whole lot of need for, a lot of times in the past, smaller groups that are going somewhere throughout the day would use that particular bus, but because we haven't had a lot of that stuff going on, the nice thing about those is whoever the activity advisor is can just drive it, and you don't have to worry about, about finding another bus driver to do that. So to answer your question, yes, we have typically used it quite a bit in the past, but this year it's probably gone down a little just because of the fact that there aren't as many in-person events going on. So the only other thing, I know when we did our strategic planning stuff, one of the things that was brought up was trying to add some natural light to these middle classrooms over here. I did reach out to somebody about coming in just to take a look and see if A, it's feasible, and B, if it is, if they could give me a rough idea of how much that would cost, just so we can kind of start to address things on that particular list. So when I get more information on that, I will let you know. So that's what I have in my report. Oh, I should mention, I do have one executive session item that came up. I don't have that on the agenda, but I do have one that came up earlier today that I would like to discuss with you.
Jeremy, I think that's 1, 2, 3 for state.
It's a personnel issue, Jeremy. So it's the first one on the list.
All right. Any other questions for Kevin? All right. Thank you, Kevin. And that'll bring us to business items, and Nathan talked. Jared, did you want to talk again? Okay. Then we hold a board discussion regarding the future reorganization, consolidation with Marion School District. And as far as that, we're just basically looking to if we want to continue down the path, basically is what we're looking there.
So like when we talked earlier today, I think at this point, we just want to keep things simple. So are we interested in finding out more about the benefits, or I guess the other side of it, in what that could potentially look like? I know we had talked the other night. I thought Tom did a good job, but most of the information that was thrown up there was kind of one-sided in terms of our current status. I know, and some of the people that I've talked to, and even the two of us talked on the phone today, it would be nice to get a better idea of, what more specifically, if people are interested in this saving us money, where that's going to come from. And additional, you start talking maybe a little more specifically about what the makeup is going to be, what you'd be able to add, so on and so forth, and different things like that. So I think that's where we're at in terms of making a decision on that. Are we interested in finding out more about that? Or are we to the point where we heard enough the other night and we just said, we don't want to talk about it, we should just, move on?
Well, like I said when we talked, I think we owe it to everybody to at least explore further to find out what the potential cost savings are or advantages are. And I agree, Tom did a nice job, but I was hopeful he was going to get into a little bit more of the potential savings, not just mentioning, like he mentioned, well, you'd say for not having a administrator or two administrators, it'd be nice if we could get into more of the, and maybe that's, looking at his plan, that maybe was what his next step was for the next meeting or whatever. But I would be in favor of at least taking another meeting on and going from there.
In talking with, I've had a number of people contact me via email, phone calls, and personally, just in person, and said that we should explore this, and I think we should explore it a little bit farther too, and see what's going to be, what it could do for both of our schools if we consolidate and get a little bit more information on it. So I think we should move ahead and explore that.
From a financial standpoint, how much is it going to cost us to move forward with Tom on this?
So if I remember correctly, and I can find it here and pull it up, I might have even forwarded that. Did I? No, I don't know if I forwarded this. It was just the timeline stuff. It wasn't. So it was, I believe.
Half and half, 5 and 5, basically.
Yeah, I think it was 45. I think it was $9,000 total.
So that is.
Was it?
For both schools. So I think it was about 4,500 on both sides.
Okay.
And if I remember correctly, there's, multiple public meetings scheduled throughout that process until you actually get to the point where you have your plan that you have to submit to the state and all that stuff. So we're still a long ways off on, getting into some of that stuff. So, and like the nice thing about working with Tom is he's pretty upfront with you on that stuff in terms of, I'll take you as far as you want to go. So, but I do think it would be important to have him involved in that process. I think he's good at presenting things to the public, as we saw the other night. But at the same time, he's already worked with Marion for an extended period of time. So he kind of knows the ins and outs of everything they got going on over there. So I think that would help us really figure out for sure, what this could look like and where we're going to be able to save some different things. So I would recommend involving him in that process.
The one caveat that I had is I think I had a lot of questions financially, how things would work, because it was, I think a lot of people were confused with some of the examples, like if we have 40 kids in the class and we have to hire 2 teachers rather than 1, where's the savings? And so there was, I think that was one of the examples he brought up with elementary numbers together. So I think probably most of the questions came financially. So I think that's probably a place we probably need to start. But if things look good from that point, the thing that I wonder is whenever 2 companies come together, I've never seen one person, a lawyer or a representative, represent both companies. So because they are hired by Marion, and so I think there's probably a conflict of interest that I think each school probably has their ideas of what they want to see and what would be our advantages, what would be our disadvantages. To have one person try to be in the middle on the fence between 2 different entities, I think might be kind of hard. So I would say maybe in the future to consider having, a different person. And I think Tom does a wonderful job, but I think it'd be really hard for one person to represent 2 schools.
I guess my rebuttal to that would be, he's not necessarily representing, he's mediating between the 2. I mean, he's not, I would guess on their end, it's a little different because they're going to have some administrative turnover over there. But mostly he's there to collect information and present it to us. You guys are the ones that have to come up with the plan and what you're okay with on your end. And I just know that in dealing with him and the experience that he has, I just think it would be, I don't know that it would be a good idea to leave him out of this, because I think he has done this several times and he's familiar with it. And there's no additional financial incentive involved for him one way or the other. He's getting half from one side and half from the other. It doesn't matter if he gets this side, a better deal, or this side a better deal. It doesn't change what the contractual agreement or arrangement is with him. So I just think that it would be best, at least initially, to keep him involved in the process.
I'd agree with that.
Sounds good.
Okay, well then I guess we don't need, consensus is good enough. We're not voting on anything. We don't need a vote or anything like that.
I don't think you'd have to, as long as you're in favor of that.
Which everybody was. All right. And then also it's got discussion regarding a potential sports cooperative, and it's got the Marion School District. And then I would assume now Freeman Academy has talked about the same thing for both, if that makes sense.
Can we talk about both now? Is that, I'm kind of curious too.
I mean, we're nothing set in stone, so like we're just talking about potentially a co-op, right?
Sorry, I was writing stuff down. What?
So, I mean, can we just discuss throwing Freeman Academy into the mix with the Marion Sports Cooperative as well here? Or do we just got to stick to Freeman and Marion?
No, I think you can go whatever direction you want to go on that. I mean, we're not, like I said, we're not making any decision that's going to bind us to anything moving forward. We're just saying, based on our current situation, we're interested in exploring a sports co-op. And, if you want to.
So here's the tricky thing for me, looking at a three-way partnership, is that with the numbers as they are right now between Marion and Freeman, we still stay just a hair under at B. If we add Freeman Academy into the mix, we're for sure A, all sports. If you could have a co-op between Marion and Freeman and still stay B, I think that's going to ease a lot of people's minds in regards to some of the concerns they have. Now, if we go into a three-way partnership, we're for sure A. Is there enough public support for that? It's a tricky one.
I understand. My personal feeling on the whole thing is I've never been afraid if it pushed us to A or 11-man in football. The ball is still round or oblong in each sport, so it just take a little time to get there. I would not necessarily be opposed to it. Obviously it would take more public input on something like that, but I mean, it's something I think I would be, especially if we're going to continue with the reorganization stuff, like, well, it makes sense if it looks like we're going that way. And I know we're talking kind of next year a little bit, maybe even potentially, but some of our sports, maybe, volleyball, whatever, I think numbers are decent, but in the winter sport, I mean, we kids, I don't.
Yeah, there's no arguing you can use more kids. It's just, what's that magic number?
Well,
is it this many or is it this many?
Right. And some of that is the number is set now, right?
So typically, they figure out ADM first Friday in December. So they did it this past December. Typically it's usually that sets everything for the next 2 years, but this is different. It sets it for 1 because they want to get on the same rotation as the neighboring states. So when they do all that stuff and reclassification, it lines up with them. And that's because of some of our teams that go across borders to play games and different things like that. Like I talked, you look at the numbers right now, Slade is correct. We would be B for at least 1 more year. The following year, so we'll get to December of this coming year now, so the next fall, and they'll do ADMs all over again. Now, I don't know exactly where we're going to end up. So right now, I believe we're about 4 kids away from having to go. Right, if you look at Marion, if the 2 of them go together, about 4 kids away from having to go A. Obviously, things can fluctuate in a year. We talked about how we ended up getting, essentially about 12 to 15 kids after the end of October this year. So, again, one of those things where we didn't get state funding for them, but they were counted towards our ADM for the next school year. I think if you look at where we are right now, when they count in December, this coming December now, I think it's going to be really close again, because right now our smallest classes, and I believe for the most part, their smallest classes are both in the high school. So inevitably, I think you're probably going to end up going, even if it's just Freeman Marion, you're going to end up probably going A at some point in time. It's just a matter of, how far down the road do we want that to, are we okay with, if we're going to go A, is a 1 year or a 3 year buffer before we get there okay? Is that enough to kind of cushion the blow? I'm with you. A doesn't bother me. But I know for some people that's a big thing. And, that's one of the things that I think we're going to battle here a little bit is, are the positives and the benefits we get out of a sports co-op, regardless of what class we go to, do they outweigh the fact that you're going to have to go up? So there's some of that.
Well, and if that is the concern, and for sake of discussion, we decided not to do a consolidation, and that would put us in A, and that was hang up the academy as far as ADM, and if we Freeman Academy, we would not be anywhere close. I mean, just adding that in there. I mean, like,
I would assume that they're probably smaller.
So I would guess that if that's the case, the Freeman Academy one would keep you below A.
Is that what it is, Austin or Jared? 27?
But that.
One of the things I'm gonna bring up, and I've debated on a long time how long to sit on this before we actually kind of get it out there in the open, because I know there's people that are thinking about it. One of the concerns I have with a Freeman Academy co-op, or all three of us coming together and involving Freeman Academy in this, is what is that going to potentially do for our enrollment? So let me expand upon that for a second. I do believe we have a fair number of people that have ties to Freeman Academy in our building, that their kids come to Freeman Public because of the opportunities they have to play athletics. If we decide that we're going to co-op with them, what does that do for those people? If they now find out that they could send their kid to Freeman Academy and they have the same opportunity to still play athletics with all these people, are we going to end up losing kids that direction? I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's something that needed to be brought up and people need to at least consider when you're thinking about doing this. Just because, like I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier tonight, 4 or 5 years ago, we were down about 50 kids from where we are right now. And because of where we were, we had to ask taxpayers for more money because we were struggling to kind of operate. So if you start gradually losing kids that direction because of something like that, do we now end up back in that position again where we're struggling to kind of get along financially? And I think the thing that people need to understand about that is, I'm coming from a business perspective on that. I'm not coming from, oh, these are my personal feelings and I don't like people that are over there or anything like that, because I couldn't be further from the truth. I just think we have to be realistic about how something like that could impact us on that end of the deal as well. And like I said, you're not going to know for sure, but it's something that, like I said, I think needs to be said. It needs to be considered when you're thinking about how all this might shake out in the long run. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
There may be a point to that. The thing that I'm wondering is Freeman Academy's basketball is really strong this year. And if there would ever be a year that that scenario, like you're saying, would play out would be this year, where if we would lose students, we should have lost them this year. And so I don't know if that's quite as valid. The other part of that I wondered too is when it came time for opt-out vote here a few years ago, I remember seeing people walk through there and vote in the library. And I remember seeing a lot of Freeman Academy people coming through. And I always kind of have this in the back of my mind that a lot of money that's coming here for capital outlay is coming from the whole community. And what would that do to have a Freeman Academy, Freeman Public Sports Co-op? What would that do for not only community spirit, but what would that do for an opt-out situation? So that's probably the other side of the coin.
Another thing to consider too with that, if we were to consolidate with Marion, I don't know that the 4 or 5 students that would swing a different direction would really matter that much in the big picture at that point. Right now, maybe a little different story. In 2-3 years, if there was a consolidation, I don't think that would put much of a dent in things.
Well, and I think, you know, whatever you decide to do, I mean, even if it's all 3, if it's just 2 of the 3, I think there's always some assumption of risk one way or the other. I mean, even if you do a Freeman Marion deal, what's to say that, you know, we have kids here in Freeman that say, well, I don't want to do that, or, you know, I don't feel comfortable doing that, and they decide to go somewhere else, or, you know, on the Marion side of things. I'm just, you know, like I said, it's one of those things that I believe needed to be said, because I think there is a lot of that perception out there as a concern. And I don't know that we would be doing our due diligence if we just continued to kind of sit on that and not say that. So, like I said, it's not my intention to try to offend people by saying that. I think it's something that is, you know, a concern that needed to be voiced. So.
And Kevin's totally right. I mean, if we go down and do a consolidation of schools with Marion or a sports co-op with Marion, it doesn't necessarily mean those kids are going to come here or we're going to have all our kids stay here either. I would like to think they would all decide to come here, but they can, with this open enrollment, these kids can go anywhere, and they can go to Bridgewater, they can go to, you know, Canastota if they want, or they go to Parker, or they go to Menno. You know, it is, like Kevin said, there is some risk to doing a sports co-op, or a consolidation, but that's something we also have to kind of look past a little bit too, and hopefully that everybody is on board and sends their kids to the place where they're joining in the co-op or a consolidation.
As far as the sports co-op, when we talked earlier today, Kevin, we have till, you said April, I remember right, sometime.
So the next executive board meeting for the Activity Association is, well, they have one, I think, Wednesday of this week, where you had, if you were going to do a football co-op, you had to have that submitted by then. The next one after that is April. So if you intend to co-op as soon as next fall, which you could do in all sports other than football with whoever it might be, you just have to have that information and paperwork, and all boards have to decide on that and approve it. That has to be to the Activity Association prior to that meeting, because that's when they will vote to accept that.
And is there a little bit of grace period on that or all, really?
I'm sure there could be if you talk to them ahead of time about it, but I think they usually like to, let's get our business taken care of, because they don't meet every month. I want to say it's like a 4 or 5 time a year type deal, like January, April, July. So I don't even know. There might be another one in between there, but I don't. Maybe Austin, you would know better than I do. I know it's not an every month deal though.
So I guess potentially, like, since we're talking about regarding a potential sports co-op, would everybody be at least in favor of having that discussion, see where the public would stand as far as, or
You're talking like a public meeting or?
I don't have a million public meetings, but I know we're gonna have to have at least another one. And as far as like the consolidation thing, and if we're actually considering the consolidation, I would assume everybody would be on board with co-oping.
Consolidation is up to.
No, I know that. No, I know that, but, right, I know that, but I'm saying like, well, I'm guessing you don't want to vote tonight if we were. No, but I'm just saying, like, is it something we want to have a meeting with to see where the public stands and has feelings, or we want to go with the consolidation thing and see where that takes us? Because when is the idea for the next meeting as far as consolidation? Like, not to go back to that, but if we were going to continue down that road, I'm assuming we're going to do it before April.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume we would. I would have to check and see. I don't remember when I looked at the original timeline we had in place, when, you know, that took into consideration kind of getting the ball rolling back in like October, you know, there was a public meeting right off the bat. I can't remember how far down the road the next one was. So I'd have to get some things together to figure that out. You know, I don't know if you want to do them together, or if you want to just say, like, you know, it might take some time to collect the information that you want for the actual consolidation meeting. So you might end up having to have a separate one, like if you're just trying to, you know, whether it's weighing the pros and cons of a co-op, so to speak, and then trying to gauge some interest, or maybe not necessarily interest, but gather feedback from people in terms of what's the feel in the room here, in terms of, do you think this would go if we did it or not? So.
I guess that's kind of, I mean.
Have a timeout, step back for a second. As far as our co-op, we saw a year after this school year, then we have another season of football basically.
So the co-op with Canastota will continue until one of us decides that they don't want to continue it anymore.
So it's not set in stone like a 2-year, 3-year cycle where we have to revisit.
You know, there are some schools that do that in terms of locally amongst their board. They have agreements that say, well, we're going to stay in this for 2 years or 3 years or whatever the case is. In my conversations with the Activities Association, their perception is a co-op is a co-op until we receive paperwork from you saying that you want to dissolve the co-op. So, and my understanding is that can come from either side of the co-op. So that could be us submitting that. It could be Canastota submitting that, one way or the other. Now, you know, they have no interest in going anywhere, you know, based on my conversations with them. So, and I also have talked to them about the fact that we are exploring options in other sports than football, but that right now football is not on the table as a part of any of that other stuff. So they are aware of what's going on.
As most of you know, I mean, generally when you do a co-op, especially like if you would do one with Marion, it ends up being more like a dating period. Especially when you're looking at doing a consolidation of any kind. You get a feel of who's all going to be there to participate, who's going to probably continue to be there to participate in the sports, and who's really in it to make this thing work. And that's generally when you look at some of the communities in the area that are doing that, and a lot of those end up being the consolidation of schools after a period of time. And I really think we should look at getting together with Marion and discussing the sports co-op, especially if we're thinking of any type of a consolidation with them, you know, in the long run.
If you're still asking about a public meeting, I'd be up for it. I know when we didn't have enough boys to do a varsity season. Jeremy, do you remember all the meetings we had? And it wasn't fun. I felt like we really got to know what the community wanted, and because I think there was people kind of on both sides, but I felt that there was kind of an overall, there was enough of a clear direction that we felt pretty good about. I think it was Canastota, what we were voting on some of those meetings. So I don't know. I feel that sometimes public meetings can be a little bit messy, but I think they're good.
I guess, yeah, I'd like to hear from the public before I make a decision.
So I suppose at this point, like, even with the organization, like, we're gonna have, like, are you gonna, like, do you want to decide that next month? Do you want to try and figure out dates this month? Like,
So a couple of things. So what I'm getting out of everybody here is we're okay. So before we even want to actually have a conversation with the Freeman Academy or a Marion, we want to talk to our own people. Is that what I'm kind of getting from everybody here? Okay. I mean, I'm with you. I could make a decision tonight and tell you one way or the other where I would
I've
stand
had
on it.
enough
But
feedback from enough people in the community that have basically said, you guys need to explore a co-op with Marion.
I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't have a public meeting. I mean, I think we could present them with, the pros and cons of, what a sports co-op could do or what, one of those types of deals. Or at some point in time, you're going to have to get the public involved. It's just a matter of, when you want to do that, I guess is the thing. Do you want to start having some smaller conversations with Marion and Freeman Academy and figure out where their interest lies, what they're actually, want to get into? Or do you want to just for sure get everybody publicly in the room and say, okay, this is what we're thinking about doing. Here's a mic, ready to go.
I don't care. I mean, whatever. If you want to do, if you really small groups is fine. I don't care. I am in favor of exploring it. So but how we want to take our next step is, I guess, I'm asking, do we want to start having something to say to the community that, hey, this is what we're thinking, or
Jared, do you have a feel like, since Nathan talked there, I feel kind of a little bit obligated to hear you guys out, and would you feel better like in a small group type thing to talk about these things, have a couple board members come over, or what were you guys maybe thinking?
Yeah, that would be, I think that's what we're hoping for, is that it doesn't just kind of drop and not go anywhere. I think the next thing we would be thinking is that, maybe instead of like full board, you just a couple of your board and our board, would try to get together and see where we're at.
Okay.
That way you guys have more chance to kind of talk amongst your board and our board, we're kind of talk about ourselves more and get better idea, I guess. If that answers the question.
Okay. Well, maybe that's the angle to.
that's fine. I mean, that's fine. But if we want to go try and have some of the ideas or something, that's on me for that. That's what you feel?
No, I'm just nodding. If that's okay with you. I don't know. I'm pretty set on how I'm gonna go on this one. So if you guys want more public input, or if you guys want to talk to the other board members, that's fine. But I think I know where I stand on this one, so I'm probably not the best. I'll send over.
Do you want to hear the academy out or not really?
I do.
Okay.
I think we're supposed to be meeting A with Marion. I don't know why we wouldn't want to be a mid-sized A as opposed to like a small state. So why not have as many people on these athletic teams as we possibly can? I'm not gonna say it's a no-brainer, but for me, I feel like you're gonna have a lot better quality athletics with more students you have. And we're gonna be bumped up to A anyway the year if we do a co-op. let's be a competitive, not one of the.
Okay, so you're thinking all three then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just, that's fine, but just a question though, like if we were to not, like say the whole failed to consolidate, you would still be in favor of Class A? Okay, that's.
I'm frustrated watching freshman boys play varsity. It's just not, they should be playing JV and young ball. We need more students. We have tiers of athletes to be competitive.
Okay.
We're just not there right now.
Okay, so how about, because Jared feels that we would like to meet groups or to iron out stuff, let's start with that, even though we maybe are in favor of it, but that gives more time for public input and also then we can talk to them and or Marion if that works. Does that sound good? Everybody sounds good? Okay. Anything else? Anybody? All right, then I think we are just to executive session for.
Do we want to set, a couple people for the group already, or you want to just play it by?
So are they gonna meet with both communities or just Freeman Academy? Okay.
That's
Just making
okay.
sure. I'm just making sure.
Okay.
If we're talking all three,
And-
if we're talking schools co-op, I feel we need to talk about full schools.
Probably individually, or what, do you guys want to talk individually and then go from there?
Either way, I would be fine, I think we would be fine going Freeman Academy to Freeman and Freeman with Marion.
Okay,
And then all three of us together after, something like that, maybe I'm just going around there, I don't know if that's.
sure.
Good, you guys, I have our board necessarily, but we want discussion, however that ends. So if it starts with just the two of us and then goes to the three of us, I think that'd be good with us.
Okay.
I think that if we're gonna consider all three, we just need to get all three in the room at the same time right away. And that avoids the perception of, well, I'm talking to this group about this and I'm talking to this group about something different. And you just get it, if you're gonna say something to one of them, you might as well say it to both of them in the same room.
That's fine by me.
So, well, I'll see how we can figure that. I'll talk to Nathan and then I'll talk with Marion too and figure out if we can figure something out.
Okay. All right, then we're going to go to executive session. So I need a motion to go into executive session. Motion by Slade. Second by Mark. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you guys for all coming tonight.
Thanks, y'all.
Have a great night.
See you next time.
We hit leave.
I think so, yeah. No, there will not be. Okay. More, reading for himself. You're rowdy in here.
That dog, you ever find out who it was? So I saw that dog.